Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Classical Crossover Magazine live stream. Today, I have a real treat. I am joined by Rhydian Roberts from Wales. How are you doing, Rhydian?
I'm really good, Natasha. It's so great to finally meet you, albeit through the computer. But I've never actually chatted to you in person. But you've been so supportive to me and many others over the years. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know, I mean, you probably don't remember this, but when I was just starting, you were one of my first emailed interviews. So I really was appreciative of that.
I do remember that. Of course I do. But we never spoke though, did we? It was just
No, it was all
email.
email.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I said because I had an interview with Jani, who's been brilliant as well, and I said between the two of you, classical crossover and the radio and what she does and what you do in the magazine, it's just brilliant the way you celebrate and support our community. Giving a platform and a voice to us because it's not the easiest genre to be recognized, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on as
Yeah.
far as the record industry, and how hard it is now to sell CDs and units because it's all about streaming. And pop songs and dance tracks get streamed. It could be in the gym, it could be in a salon where they're doing people's hair or whatever. But classical music, whilst your fans might stream it,
Yeah.
the number is far fewer than the pop world. And you need 1,000 streams now that constitutes one sale. You need to stream the album
Which
a
is
thousand
insane.
times for
Yeah.
one sale. So it's slowly trying to kill the record industry, and there's not much money in that either, unless you're streaming billions. And if you're Harry Styles, fantastic. If you're Taylor Swift, great. Um, there's a lot of good things as well, because obviously there's a purpose to recording, because we have a fan base out there. We want to share our gift, and those discerning audience members that hear us are grateful, I'm sure. I hope they are. And anyway, I'm rabbiting on already. But I'm
No, no,
passionate
no.
about this because this is we're talking. I guess part of the chat tonight is my album. So this is my penultimate album, my last classical album, and it's been really informative making this last album, because the album previous was about 4 years ago,
Mm.
and just seeing how the industry's changed in that time has been um, staggering.
Well, if we go back to when you came out, right? So, you came from, I think it was the fourth season of X Factor, is that right?
Yes.
And you look at the contracts back then versus now, and it's totally different world, right? So,
Well, I haven't seen the current contracts of these shows. I mean, what I would say is back then in 2007, it was still the great years of the music industry. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have the last 2 good years really of the music industry, where things were, there was a lavish expenditure of production, of best songwriters. The travel you had was first class, this and everything. It was wonderful. Um, and the deal we had was very favorable. I mean, it won't get into business side of things, but the advance you get and all of this was nice.
right.
And we got treated well. Nowadays, you don't get any of that. So to answer your question, that would have changed, yeah. Um, and it's these type of shows are certainly gearing towards younger audiences now. Back in my day, it was more of a family thing. It's what people did as a family on a Saturday night together in the house, or before you went out on the town, you'd watch a bit of X Factor, vote, and so it's changed. And also, what I'd say is catch-up television. It didn't exist in my time.
Yeah.
I sound old now. I'm 40 now. I celebrated my 40th birthday last week, and I've had COVID. You can hear it in my voice, but I feel good. I feel good.
Good.
But what was I saying? I was saying something about
The nature of the show changing.
the nature of the show changing. And yes, I'm glad I did it when I did, because we didn't have the catch-up TV, and you were performing in front of a wider audience. So we had about 13, 14 million people every Saturday watching. So in the UK, that's really good viewing figures. I guess in the States that's not bad viewing figures now as well. I don't know.
No, I think
But
that's pretty good.
it's enough to launch your career, put it that way, and that's why I went into the show in the first place.
Well, can I ask you about that? So coming in, I read, you were singing at 5. It sounds like you're already doing solos and that sort of thing, and then you were also in rugby for a bit as well, right? So what made you decide, because you were getting classical training, and I think you were doing well. You won a couple prizes, Mario Lanza awards, different things. What made you go, okay, but I want the crossover side. I want more to be more commercial, or was it here?
Right, I got most of that. You did pixelate, so I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay? You can hear me okay?
I can hear you. Sorry about that. Yes.
Right,
Did you get the end of the question?
Okay. I got the crux of it, yeah. I mean, look, what it was, I went to music school by accident, to be honest with you. I did a gap year in South Africa teaching sport, a little bit of music and drama. It's like a gap student, experiencing a little bit of travel after school. And I had professional lessons there with a guy called Stefan Lowe. He was amazing. But I came back to the UK and I studied drama. And I did a theory-based drama degree, which didn't really suit me. Somebody heard me sing, and then they gave me a scholarship to go to the opera school and the classical school.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I went, but I wanted to be a performer, no doubt. But I didn't think I'd go to a bona fide classical school. I was going to do musical theatre, and so if we go a little bit before that, from my childhood, where it really started, at the age of 4, I was competing in Eisteddfods. That's little competitions we have in Wales, where there's a panel. Sometimes it's televised too, if you get to a good standard, which I managed to do. It was my first dipping the toe into sort of the model of X Factor in a way. There was a prize, audience, TV, and I used to thrive on it. And I said in a few interviews recently that I used to love getting up at home and performing for the family. If they had guests over, my parents would say, "You're up. You need to entertain us." And I didn't shy away. I was like, "Great." So I would sing for them. And I got asked the other day what my inspirations were, and I have many, but actually I have to say, we had a cartoon, Raymond Briggs, the story The Snowman, and it's quite sweet to think about it. Raymond passed away last year, but Aled Jones recorded I'm Walking in the Air, and at that stage I was 5 or 6 years old when he was in the charts, and so I used to think, right, I could do this. So I was a boy treble, and I was competing and winning quite a few competitions, and then I went to school to focus on rugby. But there was chapel in the morning, so I used to sing out and enjoy singing the hymns. And then I went to see an opera. I mean, a lot of my fans know this story, verbatim, but they've heard it many times. But for those new listeners, I saw the Pearlfishers and fell in love with the music. And I feature one of the songs on my new album as well, the song that made me want to go into music. But my inspirations, other than Aled, or that song, I'm Walking in the Air, were Sir Bryn Terfel, who I heard sing at the last night of the proms with his beautiful baritone voice in '93, I believe it was, and then seeing him interviewed about his life in the VT footage, how humble he was, humble beginnings, he was a farmer, and I used to live around farms myself, and he loved sport and rugby, and I was there as a young boy going, that sounds like me. I want to do that,
Yeah.
So that was an inspiration to me. And then I played the trumpet and had many influences in music like Hick and Hardenberger and Wynton Marsalis, the jazz trumpeter, and then pursued a career in music. So I combined music and sport together.
So tell us, looking back at X Factor, I think there's a number of different things. As probably a young artist, I think now we know reality TV better. but back then it was a new thing. And I think we forget that there's writers and they're kind of trying to maybe each season have different personalities, right? So would you say now that you're in two sides of the industry now, because you not only performed, but now you're also manager. If you could go back and give yourself some advice now, knowing all the things you know, would you change anything about the experience, or would you kind of do it exactly as you did?
Well, that's a good question. And I would change a few things, yeah. I mean, it's a cliche, but the benefit of hindsight's a wonderful thing. I mean, overall, I had a good experience, great experience. I loved it for so many reasons. The people you work with, performing on that stage, wonderful sound, lights, LED screens, the production alone with thousands of pounds. We don't go out like that anymore. I mean, the big stars do, but the production, every song was expensive. They pay for it. Thanks very much. The things you wear, the stylist, the hairstylist, the vocal coaches, the choreographer, all of the rest of it. It was second to none. I mean, I would have done more research about the backstories they require. The sob stories. People say I didn't know much about that, so I didn't really have a sob story. But to be honest with you, Natasha, if I did know, I don't think I would have put on a story.
Yeah.
For me, it was all about, do you like my voice or not? Do I move you? Do you find me entertaining? And I'd cultivated a sort of a training and a career prior to X Factor, which kind of, I fused classical singing with an image. So I look a little different. I have the white hair, and I used to wear unique type of clothing and suits. But I formed that through college because I wanted to stand out, and I was a showman. And I guess if you go on a show like that, you have to be. You can't lack confidence going on a show. I mean, I know they feature people without confidence, but do they really stand the test of time after X Factor? They might grow, and everybody can grow. I'm not saying they can't, but it's quite full on. So the show lent itself to me quite well. But my point being, I thought, here's an opportunity to fuse pop and showmanship and classical singing, because my heroes when I was growing up was Sabrin Tervo, Pavarotti, Meatloaf, Prince, and Freddie Mercury from Queen.
Yep.
So it's a quite an eclectic mix, but it was about fusing those those inspirations, and it was a great platform because Simon Cowell, he loves classical singing, and he looked after Il Divo, and his mother is passionate about opera. She's
Nice.
Sadly passed away now, but yeah. So he was a fan of mine from the get go. So that made it a little easier. So these are the good things about the show, which I wouldn't change. I mean, it was quite arduous in many respects, the way they treat you and the production company and all of that. It's fine. They probably did me a favor making me a point of interest. Yeah. But it's a bit tedious sitting and doing VTs for 3 hours so they can get a soundbite from you and then edit, all of that. But water under the bridge. I would say what I would change differently post X Factor, when you're with the record deal, is be a bit more firm with the choices. Like my second album, I probably would have gone a different route. My first album was very much crossover, almost Josh Groban-y, and I would have gone in the same vein with the second. But they went very much classical with male voice choirs, and it was a good album. We did it with Carl Jenkins, and it's good, but I would have done that later in my career. So things like that. There were probably other regrets, but nothing
major.
Nothing major, too small to even discuss. It sounds like the song "My Way." Yeah, I had a few, but too few to mention. Sorry, yeah, but I do have some regrets, but you learn on the way. You learn, and you're never going to get perfect. And that's a bit of advice I'd say to anybody in classical singing. Don't be so hard on yourself. Very seldom do you get perfect. You're against the elements, the sound, the acoustic. You might be a bit under the weather. You might be with a record label that wants you to do one thing and you want to do another. You might be having a bad day. And what matters when you're singing classically is technique, resonance, breathing, relaxation, a good night's sleep. Or, you got to focus on that first and foremost. And all the other stuff is secondary. But what I would say with how I've had a long career is combining, hopefully, maybe your listeners might disagree, but voice with personality, with a little bit of USP, that now other people do. But back then, I did have a bit of a unique selling point because Josh Groban and I are different. I mean, he did steal my career. I would say that. With record sales, and well done to Josh because he's fantastic. But he's got a lovely tone and a lovely voice, but we look very different. He's puppy dog and curly hair, and I'm just like this alienonic kind of white Scandinavian looking Welshman. Right? But I had a good ride. I really did. I mean, 15 years of being very busy.
Yeah. And when you mentioned there the classical singing, I feel like we're very hard on ourselves, as you said. What would you say? Were you more worried about yourself, like the inner voice that was asking for perfection, or were you worried about what are critics going to say?
Ooh, both. Mainly the inner voice. I mean, the inner voice, because you know how good you can be. Most of my best work has been in the practice room. Yeah. I mean, that's easy to say, right? Because you were there to hear it. But when you nail something, you think, yes, I would like to share that, or that arrangement, or that variant of that note there works. And then you get on stage and then the nerves come or whatever. And I mean, I used to get very nervous before performing. I mean, I know all of us do, really. But once you're on stage, the nerves dissipate. And just disappear. They did for me anyway. But in a voice always with everything. And that's the worst thing. If somebody said to me, what advice would you give your younger self? And I just said, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't be so hard on yourself. And it's true. I put so much pressure on myself. And in the end, that was why I thought, I don't think I can continue at this level. I mean, part of me was thinking, I wasn't as good as Jonas Kaufman, or he's a tenor, I'm not, but or Sabrina Tedville, or big opera stars. So I never played Covent Garden or the Met, or it wasn't really my desire. I would say that too. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to cross over. This is why I love you guys so much, because you're perfect in my genre. I made a conscious decision not to go down the opera chorus route. I could have done. All my teachers were saying I should pursue an operatic career. And whilst I love opera, and I studied it, I wanted the crossover element and to be able to be a concert performer and to perform in legit musical theatre. And ironically, I say legit, and just so people, if they don't know what that is, it's your shows like Les Mis, Phantom. It's your Rodgers and Hammerstein shows like Carousel as well, rather than your pop belting type, But ironically, I performed in most of the the rock musicals rather than the legit. I sang the Phantom for Lloyd Webber on his 60th birthday, but never played the role. That's a regret of mine. I got asked to play Enjolras in Les Mis for the 25th anniversary DVD recording. Remember that? But my record label wouldn't let me release me. So I never got to play it, but my dear friend and now my client, Ramin Karimloo, played the role brilliantly. So I didn't actually play legit roles, maybe Pontius Pilate in... well, no, that's not legit. I was going to say Jesus Christ Superstar. It's not legit at all. It's a rock musical, basically. And we were Rock You, Little Shop of Horrors, Rocky Horror, War of the Worlds, Grease, Jesus Christ Superstar, and...
Were you was it the Frank Wildhorn Jekyll and Hyde, or was it a different one?
I have played Jekyll and Hyde. That's it. But
I love that music.
Yeah, it wasn't. I have to say this though. It wasn't professional. That was before it all happened. Yeah, so I played the lead and I loved it. It was extremely exhausting to play the both roles,
That
particularly the
switch is crazy.
confrontation. Yeah, the confrontation.
Yeah.
But I'm meeting Frank Wilder next week because I'm going to the
Oh
opening
wow.
night of Bonnie and Clyde in the West End because I have a client in the show. So I'm going to opening night, and I've recently been working with Kerry Ellis on her album, and Kerry is one of our clients, but she also sings with me on the album, and she on her new album, Frank wrote a brand new song with Kerry. So anyway, I digress, but it's funny how now I'm working with these writers. It's incredible. And yes, he wrote "This Is the Moment" and everything else in Jekyll and Hyde. What are the girl songs in that? They're beautiful, aren't they? Someone Like You, or what are the uh, something life? Anyway, the female songs in that show are incredible as well. Mm.
Beautiful. Yeah. I lost a couple of your words there, but I think you were talking about "This Is the
Oh,
Moment." Um, but
this
since
is
we
the
talked,
moment when I. This is the moment when I cut out.
well, let's bring up your album cover here. So it's the classical album, Hymns and Sacred Arias, and it's your final classical album. So
Mm.
tell us
Thanks for that.
about that, though, Rhydian. Like, how do you
Thank you.
decide? How do you decide that that's the moment that you need to now move on?
Well, it was tricky. I mean, I made the decision to sort of slow down just before lockdown and COVID. I made the decision in 2019, actually, before the pandemic ever came, was ever apparent. Um, uh, for a few different reasons. I didn't love performing in front of an audience so much anymore. Partly because of what we were mentioning before, the pressure,
Yeah.
that inner voice of, weren't as good as last week. It's like I got to a level and I was very hard on myself, and I used to practice 2 hours every day, and I was happy with some of the standard I got to. I was pleased with it, but then I started to not be as good. I mean, I don't know, maybe I was all right. I was all right, but if the passion goes, then it's a hard slog. Make no mistake, I'm passionate about music, hugely passionate still, all genres, and particularly crossover and classical and musical theatre, and I know it very well, having studied it and been a singer for many years. But as a performer, having the spotlight on me, it got too much in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't so much say I had stage fright, but certainly performance anxiety, and in a world where you were once selling millions of albums like I was, and then on the slow decline, the descent, it's really hard because you've got to work even harder. I was just a realist, and then couple that with what we said at the start of the podcast or the live, with records. This is my 9th album now, so I've done a few, and I'm seeing the change in the music industry and recorded music is partly soul destroying. Because if you want to make a great record, I mean, this record cost £80,000, with the orchestra. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you're not going to sell tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of copies, you will keep losing money. I'm not saying it's all about the money, but how is it sustainable? I'm fortunate I'm in a position where I can at the moment. But for many people in the music industry, it's going to be hard.
Oh, yeah.
We've always combined live with the record. Ordinarily, you'd make a record and you'd tour, and then, you'd monetize it that way. But yeah, I think we need to rethink how classical music is streamed and is more accessible. It's funny because I'm going for a number one on Friday, and I'm like a dog with a bone. I really want, I really want number one. I would love a number one, I should say, because I want never gets. That's what my mother always told me. But I would love a number one, and we are absolutely in the running. I need about I don't know, a few hundred sales to get there, more than I have at
Yeah.
the moment. And it's on Friday. But there's people in the chart like Inaudi and, you know, who's the other guy who's always there? On Andre Rieu and people like this. Fantastic artists. So congratulations to their success. But their labels have done campaigns with their, like Inaudi, for example, he streamed to mothers and fathers with babies because it puts the babies to sleep at night and in the middle of the day. So they play his music on loop. So he's constantly charting high.
Yeah.
And that's a great idea, an incentive from the record label to market it that way. You know, so ideas like this we need to think of more for our community. So it's heard on a wider platform. Anyway, I'm probably boring your listeners, so I'm going on.
No, you absolutely aren't. But let's put the cover back up because we also have in the link in the chat where you can buy this album because it does make a big difference. This is your last classical album, and I think we all want to support you to get to #1. So everyone, if you haven't, please go ahead and buy that album.
That's so supportive. Thank you. Yeah, and you know some of the names on here duetting with me, I hope some of your listeners know. So I've mentioned my hero, Sabrin Tervel. He's a crossover artist as well as a bona fide opera superstar. You know, he's played all the best opera houses, but he's also crossed over and he enjoys it. So he sings a duet with me on here. Dame Kiri Takanawa, who is an absolute legend, one of the best sopranos that ever walked the planet. She sings with me. She was Princess Diana's favorite singer. She sang at the wedding. And Bonnie Tyler sings with me. She's I don't know if you know Bonnie. Do you know Bonnie? Do you have her music over in the States? Like,
yes,
you do. Like, I Need a Hero, and
that was in the Shrek movie, wasn't it? I Need a Hero.
That's it. That's Bonnie's. Bonnie's, and Jim Steinman used to write for Bonnie a lot, and Total Eclipse of the Heart. That's a tune.
Yes.
So Bonnie's from Wales, and she sang with me on this, which was a huge honor. Loved it. And then, like I mentioned before, a Broadway and West End star and a dear friend, Kerry Ellis, who was in Wicked on Broadway, sings with me. And that's a crossover song, you know, many crossover songs. And then the hymns that mean a lot to me. The hymn that I sang at my grandmother's funeral. And I remember it, I shouldn't say this really, she's not here to defend herself, but I said, my mother said, will you sing at the funeral? And I was very close to my grandmother, as some fans will know. And I said, oh, I will, but just don't do it as they're lowering the coffin. That's all I ask, right? Yep. So I start singing the hymn, and lo and behold,
oh no!
It's as the coffin's going down into the ground.
Yep.
And I'm singing Amazing Grace a cappella, and so that's quite poignant. So that's on there. How Great Thou Art's on there, you know. So it's Ave Maria. So Carl Jenkins has done a few arrangements on this too. So yeah, it's yeah. I'm really proud of it, and it is my penultimate album. My 10th album, and my last album probably, will be more crossover and pop fused with all sorts, and it'll be 32 tracks of my favorite songs. But this was geared to try and get another #1. I've been fortunate enough to have a #1 in the classical chart. I'd like another one just to round it off, and I'm asking people to try and help me get there.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to support you. Can you tell us? Obviously, you said one more album, and then retirement. But what does that mean for you? Are you still going to sing at home for your own enjoyment? Like, what does retirement mean for you?
Well, look, I hope to, you know, find a passion again to sing live. I would love to. If I get a #1, I've said I might do another tour. I might just do that.
Okay, so incentive people.
Yeah. And, you know, I'd love to sing in America. I was supposed to do a concert in America in 2019, and it got cancelled. I was gutted. So, yeah, that would be nice. But, you know, I'm not fully retiring from life.
Yeah.
Mairead Healy, that's very sweet. I've heard of Mairead actually. Is she in isn't Mairead, that's Mairead from Celtic Women, isn't it?
I think she's actually a vocalist. I think Mairead from Celtic Women is well, there's a couple, but I think this one is a vocalist from, is it Ireland?
Wow.
Mairead, you'll have to
I
comment.
recognize the name. I recognize
Yeah.
the name. Mairead, yeah. Sorry if everybody's wondering what I'm doing. It's on the screen. Is that on everybody's
You
screen?
guys can see it. Yeah, I'm just putting up some of the
Right.
messages
That's
that are
really
coming in
sweet.
live.
Thank you, Mairead. Yeah, and so what I'm doing now is I'm promoting. I'm an agent. I'm a manager, and I work with Neil O'Brien, and I look after 35 different acts myself, mainly from the world of Broadway and West End. They range from all sorts. I mean, Americans might not know, but Elaine Page, so we're her agent. Kerry Ellis, John Barrowman, Ramin Karimloo, Alice Fern, Kerry Ellis, etc., etc. Joe Stilgate, there's loads. Rachel Tucker, who's on Broadway at the moment, I look after her. And now we look after Sabrin Tervo. So I pinch myself every second because I'm like, he's my hero. I then sang with him, and now I'm his agent, and I promoted his last tour. So I'm doing that now, and I'm loving every second. It's very involved, very different from being a performer yourself. The pressure's different.
Yeah.
And I love it, and I love working with my business partner Neil, and he's hugely experienced. I've said before in interviews, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but he's kind of changed my life. It could have just been all over, really, if you and you're there like a retired rugby player or football player going, what do I do now? Do I go into commentary or do I coach? Well, it's very difficult to comment on singing, although some of you do it really well, but I don't think I'm cut out for it. And I don't want to go into coaching, not particularly at the moment. So what do? I want to be a manager. So that's what I do with Neil, who looks after Joe Bonamassa, who some of your listeners might know who he is. He's the biggest rock blues guitarist in the world. So we're his agent. Dionne Warwick, it's like Whitney's auntie. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Paul Weller, he's an amazing artist here in the UK and further afield. And UB40 and many others. So yeah, I'm very much involved with that. I've got my property business. I've got a clinic in London, a medical clinic. I've got a family. So there's much more to look forward to, and I'm always on the hunt as well for new singers and great new voices. So if you know of anybody, which I'm sure you do, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. I like that you're able to transition to still being in music, but in a new way, right? Because you can still be a part of all the background, but you don't have to be on stage getting the anxiety, which I feel too. It's much better to promote others. I feel like for me, it's easier with my personality. And it seems like right now for you, it is as well.
Yeah, sure. I would say. And when I was singing every day in the industry heavily, I couldn't help but manage myself. I would take on everything.
Yeah.
Some might say control freak. Others might say conscientious. I don't know. But, slightly intense. But also, if you want a job done properly, do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I've had a fair few bad eggs as managers, over the years. Not everybody's got your best interests at heart, and it's all about money, and it's about quick, it's conveyor belt. So I'm very much deciding not to be that and give the artists what I know they deserve, and be real with them and straight and say, I really think this is your direction and this is how we're going to get there, and be there for them on the end of the phone daily. I've had managers before that don't answer the phone for 2 weeks. I mean, that's not management. Because they're off looking after Harry Styles or Little Mix or Leona Lewis at the time. I feel like I've done my apprenticeship. I've learned all about the music business. I've got a business head on me anyway. I would have gone into business had I not done X Factor. Well, that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, really?
What
Okay.
what I would have done, actually, is, which isn't this kind of business, but I said to Janny in the interview, she said, what advice would you give youngsters? And I have a few bits of advice. And one of them is have another string to your bow. And I was acutely aware of this at college. When I was singing, I thought I needed something else. So I was a personal trainer. So I did my level 3 and, was going to do that if I wasn't singing. And so I think it's prudent and wise to get another skill. You might not need it. Great if so. But yeah, that's one bit of advice. And then also, if you're passionate, give it a go. Absolutely, if you got the passion. I mean, you didn't ask me what advice would you give, so I won't go on. But there's this.
No, please do.
You know, if anybody does want advice, I'm happy to give it. Young singers, they can DM me in my Twitter and all that, and I will help them, because that's passion. That's really important for me to try and help young singers, and not just young singers that are still doing it, that want a break or something. I might have a contact for them that they're looking for. So yeah, so.
No, I mean, it's so important just to be versatile, right? And you've done everything. You've done TV now, you've done touring, releasing albums, being part of shows, and now you're managing. We do have a question from Amy, which I'm going to put up on the screen here. So she says, I love the album cover. Does it take a while to decide on a photo?
Thanks, Amy. Oh, well, nice to get the question. Do you know it? Yeah. Making an album is not completely straightforward. There's many different elements. Obviously, there's the songs you're going to choose. There's making the music, the producer you're going to choose, and the mixer, the master, all of this. But then there's the image side of things. And you want the album, we call it a pack shot. The front cover in the industry is a pack shot. We'll just call it front cover for now. But getting that right is important, because that's what you need in order to go on pre-sale with digitals and all the rest of it. If you don't have that, you don't really have an album. You need a front cover. And it also symbolizes what the nature of the music is. So that hopefully that looks like it's quite classical. You know, it doesn't look like that's a reggae album, does it? So hopefully, maybe it does. I don't know. But I wanted to make it look like this is very much conceptual, and that's why I called it classical album, and then hymns, songs, and arias. I find concept albums work well for me. So the styling, I have a very good stylist that I've stayed with for 15 years. She's called Faye Sawyer. I was on the phone with her today as well. She's brilliant. So I have some amazing clothes, I'm very blessed to say. And yeah, that I just thought, right, at the photo shoot, I'll take a whole load of clothes. So I took 12 different outfits for that shoot, which is a little bit lavish. I didn't use them all because you don't have time. You then book the studio and the photographer. And what I had is a main photographer and then another photographer shooting behind the scenes. And if you can afford it, I think that's really good, because you can capture other moments, you know? So that was just the front cover for this album. I look pretty relaxed, I think. And yeah, it's a nice Yves Saint Laurent suit, and I don't mind it. So yeah, but it's never a surefire thing. Sometimes you do a photo shoot and you're like, I look horrendous. I can't put that on anything. Trust me, Natasha. I've had some awful pack shots, and my fans will vouch for that. And the ironic thing is, it's with the biggest vehicle behind you. Sometimes they make the decision of what you're going to put on the front lastminute.com. So I did an album once, and I had this. I looked like I was going to murder you. I was like that with this hair like this. I was like, what on earth is that? But it was just too late to change it. So now, because I'm in control, I spend some time in how these things, come across. So thanks for the question, Amy.
Can I ask you something that maybe might be of interest to our listeners as well? So the album says remastered. as if I'm remembering correctly. What does that mean in terms of, so you have the original mixes, and what has changed with these new remastered versions that you've created?
So some of the songs I have recorded before,
Okay.
but the versions on this album, 80% of them are different from previous albums. So what I mean by that is I had recorded 3 or 4 different versions of a song. Let's say How Great Thou Art. What you heard on my previous album was not the version I wanted. Now you're hearing the version I wanted.
Got it.
And I get my producer to remix it and then remaster it. So it's a slightly different sonic experience. It's not huge. I mean, the arrangements are different, but as far as mastering, the mix is the main thing that's different. So remix and remastered. So there's a couple of songs here that I haven't recorded before. But yeah, as a collection, it's the collection I wanted on this album. So I hope that's answered your question. Remixed is you have an existing song, but maybe the strings are a bit quiet in one place and the voice is too high in another. So you can change that. So that's what I've done with this to make it the way I would like it.
So you had a little more control over the experience and what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem when you're with a major label, and like I was for 3 years. There's a huge team, and despite you having a name on the tin, they have an exec for every department, and it's like too many cooks. And when you're slightly, you have artistic integrity and you know what you want, that can be quite frustrating because they all need to justify their paycheck. And the other thing I'd say is I'm happy to listen because they've got their job for a reason, and I will always listen to an opinion. It's a democracy, and great. But if I strongly think that something should be a certain way, now I will make sure if it says Rhydian on it, I will make sure it's the way I would like it. That said, even then, even so, you're not gonna get it all your own way. I'll give you an example, right? So I'm releasing my album this week, as you've said.
Yeah.
So we've got until Friday to chart, fingers crossed. But my distribution company and Apple and all the rest of it haven't got it stocked in Amazon or HMV, which is our main supplier. So I'm going for the chart position without any stock in those stores. It will be there, but later, not in the
after the charting time.
And you're like, how did that happen? But you just got to keep your cool, and life isn't perfect, and you soon work that out. Learn that lesson, and you just got to make the best of what you have. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, I am slightly handicapped, but I'm not making excuses. But you can see my point is. I'd like to make the decisions myself, but very often there are variable factors that come to play, and you can't always have your own way. Yeah.
So tell us, as you look back on your career, do you have what would you say was your favorite or most memorable performance or album?
Oh, performance. I don't know. I mean, my favorite cut of a record was The Impossible Dream for sure, and doing the video in Iceland, and I became synonymous with that song. It was a good arrangement, and Steve Mack arranged it for me. Steve's one of the leading producers in the world, so he works with Ed Sheeran now, and Shape of You he wrote with Ed, and he's massive. So I worked with him. That was fantastic, and it suited my voice too. And I sang that as a guest on X Factor, and I sang it in pretty much every single show. It was pardon me, little bit of wind. Sorry.
You're fine.
It was delicate. It was subtle until I mentioned it. But,
all good.
It was the last song I sang in public. My fans will know that's the last song and I remember finishing that last note, going, that might be it. Yeah, anyway, that's quite sad to think about. But that song, for sure. Album wise, I've liked all the albums. I've certainly liked the first album. I loved doing a little bit of. I did a synth pop album called Waves,
Yes.
which is 80s pop of unusual takes of songs back. So it wasn't just like Duran Duran and Spandau. It was bands that were big actually in the States, and songs that had more recognition in the United States but not in the UK that I did. So that was a lot of fun doing a pop record. I did an album called One Day Like This, which I enjoyed very much. I did a rugby album. My last album, yeah, there's been performance-wise my favorite experience. I don't know. I mean, there's been so many. Wonderful. I mean, singing with Celine Dion was amazing. Singing at the Ryder Cup, the golf, Tiger Woods sitting behind me, which used
Not
to
intimidating
be,
at all.
which used to be a claim. It still is a claim.
I think so.
He had a bad few years. But it was huge for me at the time.
Yeah.
And singing anthems in the stadiums and various things. I just singing with Kiri Dekanawa on here and Sabrin, singing with Your Hero, which I've done on record and in concert, was quite special. And I've said this story before, but Sabrin said to me when we were singing, he goes, Rhydian, he speaks like that. It's beautiful lilt in his voice. He goes, Rhydian, how do you do that thing with your voice? Where did you learn that? He said. And I looked up at him because he towers over me. He's 6'5". And I went, I learned that from you, Bryn. And it was just, I've gone goosey because that was a special moment. I've sung for the Queen, front room. I've sung for the King many times because I'm an ambassador of his trust, and I'm proud that he's king now. So yeah, singing for royalty is cool. And sometimes just singing for your fans in great gigs. I mean, I have great fans. They're somewhat depleted now. They've gone away to pastures new, or Adam Lambert. And why wouldn't they? Because he's fab. but there are some that are still hugely loyal. I love each and every one of you. You know who you are, and I hope to have more fans, particularly on this new album and after speaking to you. But just small, intimate gigs for them.
Yeah,
I've done house concerts before. I did a pledge campaign for one album. It's not a bad way of making an album, getting the fans involved. And I just sang in front of 20 people in one of their houses. That audience interaction I used to love, but I also used to love the arena stuff. And I played all the biggest arenas around the country. The O2. I played that with Ruthie Henshaw, the Broadway star. We sold it out, Wembley, not stadium. Although I have performed in Wembley Stadium, but not my own concert. But Wembley Arena, I love the acoustic in the arenas for sure. My favorite acoustic in the world is Birmingham Symphony Hall in Birmingham in Britain, in the Midlands. And I studied in Birmingham, so I used to go and watch shows there. So to be singing there was amazing.
You've actually got a comment here from Vivian, and she says, we have not gone away, so your fans are here and watching today.
Well, I know Vivian's amazing. Vivian is a rare breed and a wonderful stalwart and just tower of beauty and strength in everything she does. And, she's stubborn, but she's lovely. And she's done a lot for me in the charity over the years. And Vivian, I know this because this is how prominent and prevalent my fans have been in my life. I had a wonderful husband called Philip, who was a radio DJ and knew his music inside out. And he was so gracious and interviewed me several times. He sadly passed away. She won't mind me saying that. And I sang a song that I used to dedicate to Philip and Vivian called Crossroads by Don McLean. If you don't know it, look it up. It's a lovely song. Thanks, Viv.
Well, it has been just a treat to chat with you. I've never been able to hear you live, unfortunately, but someone on my team, Matt, he said he saw you in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so he was quite excited when we saw that email come through. So thank you so much. I'm going to share one more time. Oh, let me go back to you. This is the cover. One more time, people buy it, and we're going to come back to, sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure, honestly, Natasha, and anything you want me to do to promote you guys. And I just want to thank you again on behalf of all the community with the classical crossover world, fans and performers, the platform you give people that need it. And it's amazing. And you cater for what is a niche market, but a growing market with the interest, because, your listeners know how hard it is to interpret these songs and sing with technique. And we have some wonderful singers. And so I hope what we do inspires new singers as well to come over to us. And, and I hope that major record labels see some sense and look outside the box a little bit, And if they don't, it's fine, because we'll still do it independently. But like I said, that's thanks to you guys and the fans. So as we say in Wales, diolch yn fawr. I'm not in Wales now, by the way. I'm actually in London. In the smoke. But listen, it's been a delight, and I hope to meet you one day soon.
Yes.
And do let me know if you're ever over here. And let's do it again. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those lovely words. And I think all of us together, we can build the awareness of the genre and find the right people. Because I think when people actually hear the music, they love it. It's just sometimes hearing it, So thank you again so much. Everyone, please go ahead and order your copy. Let's see if we can get Rhydian to #1 with the classical album.
I've signed a bunch of copies as well. You can get it on the shop. All those links in the iTunes, download on iTunes. Thank you guys for your support. I know times are tough, but I really appreciate the support. If I get #1, happy days.
Thank you so much.
Bye.